In the context of paying around $40 for this action camera because there was a coupon available on Amazon, I am very happy with this product so far. This is going to be my initial review of this cheap budget-friendly action camera, the Surfola SF230, which is right here together with some accessories that I'm not going to go over, but they were received with this camera, including a remote control, an extra battery, and an external microphone that you can plug into the camera. I'm going to talk about what I like about this camera and only one particular thing that I dislike, so maybe we should talk about that first. Again, this is the Surfola SF230, and this is going to be my initial review. So we have the USB cable, of course, that allows you to charge your camera and to transfer videos and photos from your camera to your computer. And here is the camera itself in the underwater housing with the extra battery shown right here. And of course, we can take the camera out of the underwater housing, and we're going to go over some of the settings just to show you some of the settings while I talk about what I like about this camera. My review of this Surfola SF230. What do I like about this camera? First, let me just mention what I dislike. Having used the camera a little bit, the first thing I noticed was that the very first time that I was charging this camera with the battery inside to transfer my photos and videos from my camera to my computer, I noticed that the camera was very hot. It seemed to be the battery area, and when I took out the battery, it seemed to be the battery that was very hot while I was charging. That was a little bit concerning to me, but I didn't really know what to make of that. I've owned about, this is I think my 16th action camera, and for some reason this particular camera just seemed very warm as it was charging, and it seemed to be the battery that was just a little bit hot while charging, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but I just noted that that was something curious I saw because I don't believe I've seen it on other action cameras, the battery area being so warm on the camera while the camera is charging. I'm not really sure if I should be drawing any conclusions from that, but that is just something I noticed. Now on to what I do like about this camera. There are a lot of things that I really like about this camera. First of all, just keep in mind that you will need to separately purchase a micro SD memory card to store your footage if you haven't already, just because, sorry. Unless you're buying a special bundle, you will not receive a free memory card with your camera. So this was, again, a separate purchase micro SD memory card. You will need to buy a memory card, or you already have one, separately so that you can insert it in the camera and so that you can store your footage, photos, your photos and videos taken and recorded with this camera. This is a very acceptable camera for the price that we paid. Again, sometimes if you look around on Amazon, you'll find some coupons or discounts, things like that, maybe 30% off, maybe $10, $20 off, etc. And so to buy this camera for around $40 in the context of paying that amount for the camera, I am very happy with the camera. I find that it records very, very acceptable video quality for the price, including my personal favorite video setting, which is for videos at 1080p 60 frames per second right here. At 2.7K also records acceptable video, though for 4K 30 frames per second, as with a lot of cheap action cameras, as you try to record at the very highest possible video setting, you might lose a few frames, so the video looks choppy and not very smooth. But for 1080p 60 frames per second, I was very happy with the video quality recorded, and similarly for 2.7K 30 frames per second, I also liked the video quality there, but for smooth, a combination of smooth video and good quality, I really like 1080p 60 frames per second. There's also a time-lapse feature, which we were just using. Let's turn that off. Slow motion. And of course, we also have, which is impressive for a cheap action camera, we have an image stabilization feature available here, EIS, Electronic Image Stabilization. And the image stabilization feature, for the price, it did a decent job of keeping the footage looking smooth and stable, though I would just say for better image stabilization, you really would like to pay at least $50, maybe $60, $70, $80 to have a cheap action camera that has good image stabilization. I find that with the fisheye effect kind of in place, the stabilization, it was a little bit hard to follow the video. So if you're kind of shaking the camera while you have the image stabilization feature on, I don't find that it'll work very well, though it did an okay job of keeping the video stable. But again, just keep in mind that for the cheapest action cameras that have image stabilization, more often than not, it's not going to be perfect. This particular camera was just a little bit hard to follow. You can see another video we made where we tested the image stabilization. Just, we were keeping the camera still, and the video was stabilized, though with the fisheye effect, some of the elements of the video were kind of moving around, and it was a little bit kind of difficult to watch the video. But again, it's a cheap camera with image stabilization. It's okay. So the other thing was that we had an extra battery here included, and the battery cover is very easy to take off. So if you have two batteries that are fully charged, it's very easy just to pull up the battery cover right here, and then you can access the battery and take it out right here. So now a little detachable piece of plastic. The battery cover is actually connected to the camera, which is very convenient. Photos are actually very good as well, all the way up to 20 megapixels. I think I had it set to 16 megapixels. For a cheap action camera where the photo feature is certainly not meant to replace the camera on your smartphone or your standalone point-and-shoot camera, the photo feature here is definitely very acceptable. The camera is very easy to use. You go between the different modes clicking the power button. So you got settings, you have video settings, photo settings. So again, the 1080p video setting feature was very acceptable. As similarly, the 2.7K 30 frames per second was also very good. You're going to have some video tests that will follow this part of the video if you'd like to see some sample videos recorded with this camera, and also some sample photos as well. This has been my review of this Surfola SF230. A little bit hot while the camera was charging. The first time I tried to charge the camera, the battery area was very, very warm. Don't know if I should be concerned about that, but that's just something just an observation that I made. For the price that I paid, decent pictures, decent photos taken with this camera, 1080p 60 frames per second. I found that to be very good. Also 2.7K 30 frames per second. I did not submerge the camera underwater, so I cannot comment if the waterproof housing will make the camera completely waterproof, so I cannot comment on that. External microphone included, extra battery, a cloth for cleaning your screen. Okay, image stabilization for the price that I paid, around $40. Again, it's just nice that you can go on Amazon and sometimes see these coupons, so I definitely encourage you, if you're looking around and you see the same camera and one day there's a huge coupon and you're interested in buying that camera, maybe that's something to check out. It's nice that there are these discounts available, because again, we paid around $40, but for $60, $70, $80, you can find a camera with many more features and better image stabilization just by paying a little bit more money. But for the price that we paid, I'm very happy with this product so far, mainly because we have my personal favorite video setting is recording good quality footage, in my opinion, the 1080p 60 frames per second resolution. Thanks for watching this video. This has been my initial review of the Surfola SF230 action camera. Happy with this product for the price that we paid. Not a whole lot of accessories, but an extra battery and an external microphone is always nice to see. Video tests will follow shortly after this part of the video. You can see some sample footage that we recorded with this camera. Hello, this is a 1080p 60 frames per second video test with the Surfola SF230 action camera. 1080p 60 frames per second video test with the Surfola SF230 action camera. (1080p 60 frames per second video test. (1080p 60 frames per second video test with the Surfola SF230 action camera. (1080p video test, 60 frames per second with the Surfola SF230 action camera. 1080p 60 frames per second video test with the Surfola SF230 action camera. (1080p video test, 60 frames per second with the Surfola SF230 action camera. 1080p video test at 60 frames per second. (1080p video test, 60 frames per second. 1080p video test at 60 frames per second with the Surfola SF230 action camera. (1080p video test at 60 frames per second. 2.7K video test, 30 frames per second. 2.7K video test, 30 frames per second with the Surfola SF230 action camera. .7K video test, 30 frames per second with the Surfola SF230 action camera. .7K video test, 30 frames per second with the Surfola action camera. .7K video test, 30 frames per second with the Surfola SF230 action camera. .7K video test, 30 frames per second. 2.7K video test at 30 frames per second with the Surfola SF230 action camera. 2.7K video test, 30 frames per second with the Surfola SF230 action camera. 2.7K video test, 30 frames per second with the Surfola SF230 action camera. .4K video test, 30 frames per second with the Surfola SF230 action camera. 4K video test at 30 frames per second with the Surfola SF230 action camera. .4K video test at 30 frames per second with the Surfola SF230 action camera. .4K video test at 30 frames per second. .4K video test, 30 frames per second.